This video is the story of my son's short life and his untimely death. On September 27th, 2019, my husband and I learned that we were pregnant, and we were so excited because obviously we had been wanting children, and we're just excited that we were going to get to start this chapter of our life, but also because we had been dealing with infertility issues for about 10 years. So this was such an answer to prayer, and we were so excited to meet our son, and we kind of knew that he was a boy right away. We needed to wait for tests to confirm that, but they did confirm that, and we have a son, and his name is Josiah. Honestly, from the time that we heard the news that we had a baby, it just started the most exciting, most beautiful season of our lives. I want to start the video off by saying that because even though this story is about his death, his life is something that we will forever cherish, and something that mattered and that still matters, and he matters. And so sharing about the joy that we had, I think, is just as important about sharing about the tragedy that happened. We had the normal amount of stresses with pregnancy, about worrying that everything would be okay, but once we made it out of the first trimester, we really kind of relaxed, and we were saying, okay, we're out of the woods, we can share, and we can celebrate, and we can really just soak up every moment. And so that's what we did. On a Wednesday night, I began having some mild cramping, and I just kind of assumed it was normal because it wasn't pain. I had no other symptoms along with the mild cramping, and hadn't really been warned about that in particular. So I just kind of assumed, like, oh, this is Braxton Hicks or something like that, but I'll keep an eye on it. But I wasn't too concerned. The following morning, I realized that it never really stopped, that I had been having these mild cramps throughout the night. And so I called first thing in the morning, called my doctor's office, and they let me know that although they didn't think it was an emergency, that I should go to labor and delivery because there were no doctors in the office that day, just to have them check everything out and make sure that everything was fine. I got ready to go in, and right before I left, when using the bathroom, I began to feel pressure and something feeling like it was dropping out. I reached down and I felt something that felt like a balloon, and so I began to panic immediately. I yelled out for my husband. I jumped up, grabbed shoes, grabbed my bag, and headed straight for the car. We rushed to labor and delivery. I laid my seat back on the ride there, and we both cried and prayed the whole way there, and begged God for this to just be resolved, for whatever was happening to stop or to be reversed or whatever. And so we got there, and they checked me out, and they did an ultrasound, and everything was normal, and they couldn't find anything wrong. So when they did the physical examination, they didn't feel anything abnormal. And when they did the ultrasound, Josiah was still happy, healthy, moving around, strong heartbeat, and was in his normal location in my torso. So they sent me home. They told me that they thought that the pain I was experiencing was probably from a UTI, and that what I felt was probably just some kind of discharge that threw me off. And after they told me that, and before they sent me home, I just kind of sat on the hospital bed stunned and confused and in shock. And I really hoped that they were right. So they prescribed UTI medicine and sent me home. And so we had another appointment that afternoon, went to the store, grocery shopped, and came home. And my husband, who had truly been so sweet and wonderful throughout all of my pregnancy, and he's sweet and wonderful besides that, but he just took care of me, and he said, like, relax, lay back, kick your feet up, rest, and like, we've been through a lot today. And he made me something to eat, and just let me know that he was going to take care of us, me and Josiah. And so that's what we were doing. We were just hanging out, and I was telling him, I'm still feeling those cramps, and this doesn't seem like a UTI. Like, everything that I've read about UTIs, that this doesn't fit. And I couldn't quite put my finger on what else it could be. So it was around 4 or 5, something like that, in the afternoon at this point, and I went up to use the restroom again, and the same thing happened. So we went back to labor and delivery, and this time things were a lot different, and they were able to conclude that something was happening and that it wasn't good news. So they wheeled me back to a private room away from the other rooms in labor and delivery, and the doctor came in and had a conversation with me, and he let me know that it didn't look good, that what was happening was, he called it incompetent cervix, and he said that I was starting labor too early because my cervix had opened up, and I was going to deliver sometime soon in the immediate future, and that my baby at 21 weeks was still too small, and his lungs were still too underdeveloped for him to survive, and that they didn't have the capabilities at this hospital to save his life. And so they let me know that he most likely was not going to make it. So we believe in God, and we believe in his power. We believe that he still does miracles, and we knew that he could do this for us. So we said, we want to wait it out. We don't want to do anything to rush this along, pray that labor stops, and try to leave him in there as long as we could so that he could develop more before he was born. So they let me know that although that was unlikely, it was not impossible, and also that if that did happen, I would be in the hospital tilted on my head for weeks, and that it would be very uncomfortable. And we said, okay, then that's what we'll do. That's what we're still hoping for. So we began the wait, and we had a lot of really wonderful friends praying for us, and we were praying, and we just stayed in that hospital room. We had another ultrasound, and Josiah was completely healthy, moving around, and his heart was strong, and he was still doing good. So we hoped that labor would stop, and that we would be able to hold on to him and save him. Labor didn't stop. It picked up. Labor was so intense that they offered me an epidural. We asked if there was any way that that could cause me to go into, further labor, or if it would hurt him at all. And they said no. So I got the epidural. I was able to start relaxing to the point where I was able to get some sleep, and not a lot, but get some sleep. and labor kind of slowed down. The contractions slowed down. It seemed to be going in a somewhat positive direction. The next morning, though, contractions began to pick up more, and I was clicking the button for more of the epidural, and it wasn't really working because the contractions were beginning to become so intense that I could still feel them very, very strongly, and I could feel my body beginning to give out. They let me know that if I felt the urge to push, to let them know, and that we would do that, but I didn't. I was basically just not willing to do anything. I began feeling that he was about to be born, and so I let my husband know. He continued to pray and he continued to hope, but he understood what it meant was probably going to happen. And so at a certain point, I wasn't pushing, and I was just trying to, during contractions, do everything I can to stay calm physically and just like hold him in. And at a certain point, I began giving birth involuntarily. So Josiah started coming out with his water bag intact. So I began birthing him in his water bag. And so they called in the doctor, and they began coaching me through giving birth. So I pushed and made a little bit of progress, but at a certain point, the doctor broke my water, and at that point, everything came out pretty quickly. The placenta, all of the fluid, and my son. They took him over to a table to the side of the room, and he was alive. And so we had already told them that we would like to spend time with him as much time as he had, so they brought him over to us. I forgot to mention my husband cut the umbilical cord, and so they brought him over to us and laid him on my chest, and we held him and looked at him, and he was tiny, he was little, but he was long. And I just was looking at him and just thinking, like, you are so much more substantial than I realized. Like, I didn't realize you were so long, because he was still so small. And whenever we saw ultrasounds of him, he was kind of curled up, so he always looked quite a bit smaller, but he was pretty big. And he looked a lot like my husband, and he was just everything that we dreamed of. He is everything that we dreamed of. He was absolutely perfect in every way. And we were able to hold our son until he passed. And he died in our arms, hopefully feeling our love and our warmth. They told us that we could stay in that room with him as long as we wanted. I also had to be checked out, and they had to make sure that I was going to be all right too. So we stayed in the hospital after I gave birth for 24 more hours and got to have our son in the room with us. And even though he died and really wasn't there anymore, we still got to grieve him and just look at him and do our best to memorize everything about him. And talk to him even though he wasn't there anymore. It was very needed for us. And so we spent 24 hours in there with him, and after that, we were discharged. So even though my son was born too young, too fragile to make it on his own, he is everything that I have ever dreamed of. He's more. He is more than we ever dreamed of. He continues to just be the absolute love of our life. I was also fortunate enough to have the doctor let me know that there was nothing that I could have done that would have caused this to happen, that my surgery, my bariatric surgery that I had, was unrelated to it, that I couldn't have exercised too much or eaten something wrong or anything like that that would have caused this issue, that this is just something that is very difficult to catch before it actually happens, and that now that it has happened and we know, that future pregnancies will be treated differently, and that there is a high likelihood that I won't have to have this happen again. So that's what happened. In such a short amount of time, we have had just the most amazing, beautiful season of our life, like the best time of our life, and then immediately just dropped off into the absolute worst time in our life. We're in the process, we're grieving, and we're making it. Instead of trying to explain where I'm at with grieving, there's a prayer that I wrote that I feel like really encapsulates my heart. I've shared it with a couple of friends, and I've felt like it was very therapeutic for me to just read it out loud and express it. And so if you're wondering how I'm doing or where I'm at, this pretty much sums it up. God, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between anxiety and excitement. I used to feel butterflies when I thought about the future, about my son being born and Mikey and I raising him. Now I feel anxious butterflies at the future. Everything seems unsure. How will I get through this grief and this emptiness? Will I ever have a healthy pregnancy with healthy babies born at full term? Will Mikey and I get to raise our children? Will I have true joy in anticipation of the future again? Sometimes I almost feel like I do, or I could, but then it's ripped from me over and over again. I'm so devastated. Pressed but not crushed. I just feel crushed. Not just my heart, my whole being. I am crushed. I want to ask for healing, wholeness, hope, joy, radical faith, but then I feel like I'm not honoring my son somehow, like I'm leaving my baby abandoned and his memory forgotten. But I know this isn't the truth. My son does not need me anymore. He is with you, right? He needed me when he was here with me, but he is gone now. This truth hurts, but it also brings a freedom that I need. I still feel the pull to him. I still feel the instincts I have as his mother to fight for him and nurture him and protect him. But he no longer needs this. Letting go feels wrong, and every part of me is screaming in protest. I want my baby. I want to wake up from this nightmare, but the nightmare is real, and I cannot wake up. This is my reality now. My world will never be the same again. I will never be the same again. It would not be honoring to my son to become a person that gives up or stops trusting in you when things are bad. Honoring my son would be allowing you to take these ashes and make something beautiful. To loosen my grip on what's been lost is not to dishonor or forget my firstborn son, my heart, my love, my baby. I would have wanted to raise my son to trust in you no matter what, to turn to you no matter what.
Wouldn't it be more dishonoring to him if I turned away from doing that myself? I know the goodness and the faithfulness of God, of you. I will not turn from it. I will let go of what has been lost, but I will never let go of what I have of my son. You used me and Mikey to bring Josiah into existence. He will live forever, and I will be with him again in eternity because you made a way. Jesus made a way. Josiah will always be our firstborn. He will always be our son. We will always love him. He matters. His life will always matter. But I must let go of my dreams of protecting him, holding him, watching him grow, celebrating his birthdays, other milestones, kissing his face for the rest of my life, and him burying us in our old age rather than us burying him. I will never have those things with him. Those things have been ripped from me violently. I am reeling. I want to hold on to these things, but they are already gone. If I don't let go, I am diluting myself. I will let go because I have no other reasonable choice. I will become the person that you intended me to be. That is honoring my son. It will be a blessing as a wife, and if you're willing, a blessing as a mother to the rest of my children. My dreams for Josiah were for him to grow in the ways of the Lord, to serve you all of his days, to be full of joy, peace, faith, and hope, and to make a difference in the kingdom of God. If I dream this for my future children, then I cannot give up on it for my own life. If I wanted it for Josiah, how can I not live it out myself? It honors him more to give my all to you, God. You are my God. I will serve you only. I will worship you only for all of my days. Help me to honor my son. Help me to honor you. I love you. I trust you. I choose you. Amen.